The moment Jasmine Crockett reached the microphone, the entire tone of the hearing shifted. She had been sitting quietly for hours, watching other members ask questions and get deflected. She had watched Bondi redirect, pivot, and refuse to engage with anything that required a direct answer. She had watched survivors sit in the gallery in white clothing, waiting for something real to happen. And by the time her turn finally arrived, Crockett had made a decision. She wasn't going to ask Bondi anything at all. What she did instead was more calculated and far more devastating. Because when you know a witness won't answer questions, the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking them. Jasmine Crockett represents Texas in Congress. Before entering politics, she was a criminal defense attorney. She knows how courtrooms work. She knows how witnesses behave under pressure. She knows the difference between a witness who can't answer and a witness who won't. And she knows exactly what it looks like when someone sitting in the witness chair has no intention of giving honest answers, regardless of what is asked. That morning, she had watched Bondi do exactly that for hours. Question after question had been met with redirection. Direct asks had been answered with political attacks. Simple factual queries had been buried under counter-accusations about the previous administration. So when her time came, Crockett did something nobody else in the room had done. She turned away from the witness table entirely. She addressed a colleague seated nearby, Representative Becca Balint. "Right or wrong?" she asked calmly. "Raping children? Wrong," Balint answered. "Right or wrong? Killing random citizens? Definitely wrong. Right or wrong? Enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States? Definitely wrong." Crockett nodded. "Thank you, because I probably never would have gotten those answers from our witness." The room understood immediately what had just happened. Crockett had turned the Attorney General of the United States into a prop. She had demonstrated, without saying it directly, that Bondi had spent the entire hearing refusing to answer basic moral questions that any first-year law student could answer without hesitation. 3 questions. 3 answers, none of them from the witness. Then she turned toward the gallery. The survivors had been there all morning, dressed in white, watching lawmakers ask questions and receive nothing in return. Crockett looked toward them directly. "Let me say thank you," she said, "for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice." The chamber absorbed those words. She continued. She spoke about what it meant for the country when the department responsible for enforcing the law could not answer basic questions about right and wrong. She spoke about what the United States looked like to the rest of the world when its chief law enforcement officer spent hours deflecting and attacking the very people asking her questions. She pointed to Thomas Massie by name. She called him the only person on the Republican side with a backbone. The only one willing to stand up to corruption even when it came from within his own party. The Republican side of the room stayed quiet. Then she turned back to the witness. "In your written testimony," Crockett said, "you stated that when you took office you had 2 main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice. The second was to return the department to its core mission." She paused. "Not only have you lied about both, you have intentionally done the exact opposite." The chamber went very still. Crockett laid out the case methodically. She said the Department of Justice was spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than prosecuting pedophiles. She named Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, both arrested. She noted that a judge had already rejected one of those attempts before the arrest was even carried out. She noted that grand juries had rejected DOJ cases against sitting senators, that cases against others had been dismissed entirely by courts. She looked directly at Bondi. "I completely don't understand how it is that you are sitting at the top of the DOJ," she said, "because you don't seem to be good at your job." No response came from the witness table. Then Crockett shifted to Epstein. She was precise about what she was and wasn't saying. "Unlike this administration," she said, "I believe that facts matter. So let's talk about the facts." She laid them out one by one. Fact 1. Donald Trump is one of the most named individuals in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contain more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact 2. According to documents in those files, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to Trump who spent more than 20 minutes with her. Fact 3. Notes from FBI investigators describe Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. She was careful with her language throughout. She said directly that she was not calling the president a pedophile, but she stated clearly that the evidence in those files placed him in very close proximity to men who are, and the administration currently overseeing those same files, she said, is complicit in covering them up. She kept going. She raised the DOJ's handling of an investigation into federal agents accused of killing American citizens. She said the department was attempting to obstruct that investigation rather than pursue it. She raised voter data. She said federal agents had seized voter data from Fulton County in what she described as a deliberate attempt to interfere with the 2026 midterm elections. She raised a recorded bribe. She said federal agents had Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe, and that the agency had killed the investigation into it rather than act on the evidence. She raised a financial arrangement she called unconstitutional. She said the department was prepared to give the president a $230 million payment. She cited the Constitution directly. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. Each item landed in the record. No response came from the witness table. Then she delivered the closing. The fact of the matter is, Crockett said, that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history. She let the sentence settle before finishing it. An attorney general who prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. She yielded back her time. The room barely had a moment before Bondi was handed a chance to respond. A Republican member thanked her for attending and asked warmly if she had anything she wanted to say. Bondi did. She noted that Crockett had refused to ask her any questions during her entire time. She said she found that interesting. Then she pivoted quickly. She accused Crockett's party leader of taking money from Epstein after Epstein had already been convicted. She said that was something nobody on the other side seemed to want to discuss. Then she began listing names. Individuals from Texas, the Dominican Republic, Afghanistan, people she said had been convicted of violent crimes in Democratic districts. Her argument was pointed. Democrats were raising Epstein, she suggested, to avoid confronting crimes happening in their own states. The exchange grew loud immediately. Members began speaking over each other. The chairman called for order more than once. Bondi had come to the hearing prepared to defend a record. She left that exchange having been forced to defend herself against a lawmaker who never gave her a question to dodge. What made Crockett's confrontation unlike anything else that morning was its architecture. She never gave Bondi an opening to deflect. By refusing to ask the witness questions directly, she removed every tool Bondi had been using all day. The pivots, the counterattacks, the long answers that buried the original question. None of those mechanisms worked against a statement of facts delivered directly into the record. Bondi could interrupt a question. She could not interrupt a verdict. And the facts Crockett placed on record were specific. Named, numbered, documented. 38,000 references, cases dismissed by courts, journalists arrested, investigations killed, a bribe on tape, a $230 million payment called out as unconstitutional, a constitution cited from memory while the attorney general sat silent across the room. Crockett had watched Bondi refuse to answer for hours. So she stopped asking, and in doing so she put everything she wanted on the record anyway. The hearing moved on. Other members took their turns. But what Crockett had delivered didn't leave the room with the gavel, because some moments in a hearing aren't questions, they're verdicts.